All right, we are rolling now. Counting us down. 3, 2. You're listening to Missing Out with Lex Michael and Tauri Jay. Let's start the show. Hey there, Misketeers. Welcome back to Missing Out. I'm Tauri Jay.
I'm Lex Michael.
And if this is your first time listening, what we do here is we introduce each other to different media, whether it be movies, music, television, spoken word, books, experiences, things that have built us up as people, and we hope that in sharing it, it builds you up. We are the retrospective, that is, introspective.
I suppose now is as good a time as any to let everyone listening know that this entire time I have been doing this podcast, yes, with Tauri Jay, but not Tauri Jay, the man, Tauri Jay, the sentient piece of clothing that I wear when I want to look hot and kick ass. And we talk to each other.
As you should. And it's crazy because no one else can hear me. And so this whole time, everyone has thought that you are just speaking to yourself, laughing to yourself crazily. And maybe one day, when I finally figure out that I am neither clothing nor human, I will be able to be heard by other people.
I mean, we can hope. we all hope to get there one day.
I hope so. As you might know, we're talking about Kill la Kill, the Studio Trigger inaugural animation. Came out in 2013. It was directed by Hiroyuki Imaishi. It was written by Kazuki Nakashima. The music, which you all know and love, was composed by Hiroyuki Sawano. This I brought in for our month entitled School's Out Forever, because this is all about how school rules the day. Lex,
I don't know. That just tickled me so much.
Oh yeah.
It is, and I mean, I think it's fair to say that yes, school is indeed out. A lot of people fighting to the death within an academy structure, and not just tearing down each other, not just like going through person after person with weird magic power outfits, but also by extension, just bringing the whole thing crashing down on itself, which makes it in a way a very appropriate resolution to this month, thematically speaking.
Indeed, and so I feel like, in case people haven't seen it and they're like, what is this Kill la Kill thing? I'm going to pitch this shit real good. All right?
Please do.
All right.
Please pitch this to me.
So, Kill la Kill is... Actually, no. I'm going to switch it up. Yo, do you like battle anime? You like that shonen shit? Oh, maybe you like magical girls. Ooh, maybe you like high school dramas. Well, this is everything and more. This is from the team that brought you Gurren Lagann. They also brought you Fooly Cooly. Yo, this team, after they had taken their leave from Gainax and was like, yo, we're going to make our own shit. We are going to go as over the top as possible. We're going to change the animation game. And they created this female-driven, over-the-top, insanely powerful, moving, slight on fascism, Kill la Kill. Oh yeah, you intrigued now, ain't you?
Is that
you
what
feeling it? Yeah, that's
Dude,
what
this
happened.
this thing is wild. You did not prepare me. You just told me, I hope you can get through as much of the show as you can before we talk about it because it's super fun. And I said, okay, I'll take your word for it. Super fun. Okay, I'll jump in. This is there's a lot. This is a bonkers program, and like you've shown me a bunch of anime, and a lot of it is definitely on the bonkers spectrum. This is a fucking bonkers show.
Yes, I felt like this show was up your alley in terms you love that over the top. You love absurdist humor. It's also really cool satire. I didn't tell you it was a satire because I just wanted you to enjoy it for what it was and see what your thoughts were. I wanted you to go in as blind as possible to get them raw thoughts, baby. Ooh. This was my second time around. Like, I watched it week to week when it first came out in 2013. And then this time around, I'm older, I'm growner, and I didn't have to watch it week to week trying to remember what the clothes were doing this time around. So I think I really got to enjoy all of the smaller, like intricate pieces. Like there's so much about Kill la Kill that is they're referencing things, the just all of the thematic aspects of it, a lot of the image references and stuff like that. Like it is so multifaceted that I almost feel like I have to let people know that I don't even think I caught everything, because everything that happens in this show is so steeped in both Japanese history, mythology, their god belief systems, anime itself. Like it is so multifaceted, this one specific anime, that I'm sure that by the end of it, you're going to be like, oh, but you didn't mention this thing. And I'm sure I didn't.
I'm not even going to pretend like I think I picked up even half of what this show is doing. I had never seen it before, of course, and I watched all of it basically in a very condensed time frame. So you know when like the style of art where you basically put a whole bunch of paint on a canvas and spin it around really fast so it streaks everywhere.
Uh huh.
That's sort of like how the show feels in my brain right now. Like
Okay.
I definitely got all the surface. All right, I definitely got most of the surface, but I could absolutely not sit here and tell you, for example, what in particular it's satirizing.
Mm.
I believe you that it was satirizing something, but I was still like I feel like I'm still stuck on, oh, so it's the clothes talk. Got it.
Okay. I mean, this your first viewing, and knowing now at this moment that it's basically from the same dudes who did Fooly Cooley, which if you remember we talked about that a while ago, which was about the kid who gets he gets hit by the guitar and then a robot comes out of his head.
Right. Yes.
So, what is your general non-spoilery feeling about the show?
I mean, it's fun. You know what I mean? Like when I decided to take on watching essentially the entire season, because as we've established repeatedly on the show, I'm not a big anime guy. There's that moment of, okay, well, I strap myself in, get a big cup of coffee because this is going to be a chore and a slog. And it was neither. This show is absolutely batshit, and it definitely kept my attention the entire time. I also think it definitely helps that you have been exposing me to anime semi regularly for the past couple of years. So I feel like every time I come to a new one, it's like that barrier for entry is a little bit easier to get past for me every time. I think it's definitely good that this wasn't one of the first ones you showed to me, because as batshit crazy as it is, I don't know that I would have been able to get into it a year ago. I enjoyed it. It's really fun. It's real bizarre. I mean, it's real bizarre, and it's committing so aggressively hard to being as bizarre as it is. I think it looks great. It's fun. The characters generally all pop. There's a lot of sort of mythology and world building going on in this show, and like a ton of moving pieces that I don't know that I could explain to somebody else. But it never got so convoluted that I felt like I couldn't follow what was happening, which for somebody who generally feels somewhat alienated by this whole medium is a big old plus for me. It's interesting how it's a show that both feels incredibly horny and not as horny as you would expect it to moment, given some of the facets of this world and this story. I want to talk about that a little bit, but I don't know that I have the vocabulary. All right, let's put it this way: they do not shy away from like hypersexualizing some of these characters in a way that feels, it can't help but feel super leery, but at the same time I couldn't tell moment to moment how creeped out I was supposed to be. I guess is my
Okay.
point. I was like, I'm a little creeped out by this, but somehow I feel like they're threading the needle just proficiently enough that I'm not totally skeezed. But I feel like if you moved that needle just a hair to the right or just a hair to the left, I would be real skeezed out by what I'm seeing.
Right. And I think that, like, especially now before we get to the spoiler wall, if someone's on the fence and they're like, I've seen clips from Kill la Kill and I know that there are butt shots, I think this is a good time to address that, in that the intent of the, like, hypersexualization slash like fan servicey moments are specifically, like, that's where a lot of the satire comes in that that has been a very big part of anime for a long time, where it's like you get all of these gratuitous shots that are unnecessary and like not in any way part of the plot. And so the idea of creating this thing specifically about like these clothes that require you to be, you know, more nude than clothes would want you to be, um is to, one, desensitize the audience to that idea, and that it is overexposing you to this fan service, so that by the end it happens and it's not even really a factor in the show anymore. Like these transformation sequences where they're going up the characters' butts and like, you know, looking at their boobs, you're kind of just like, all right, cool, it's the transformation sequence, and you're really engaged in the story. So that's one part of it. And the other is to really kind of make you question your ideas of like the old puritanical structure of seeing naked bodies. And they kind of address this a little bit when we get one of the characters' first transformation sequences, and she explains her view on that.
Yeah, and I do think, now of course I'm not as versed in anime, so I wasn't necessarily keyed in too specifically to how like they are satirizing the medium at large. But I do think they managed to get away with like, even if you're not keyed into the satirical aspect, narratively I think they managed to get away with some of that stuff because they're very clearly aware of the imagery that they're choosing to incorporate, and the show itself, and this isn't a spoiler because it happens I think from the first episode throughout the whole thing, the characters talk about, they make explicit how they find it distasteful how like scantily clad the Ryuko character is. Like they literally compare her to like a prostitute more than once. And I do like that there's this aspect of like, stop shaming this girl. Like she doesn't necessarily owe you a more modest attire, et cetera, et cetera. And it feels like they're
Right.
actually finding a way to say something about it. So even if they weren't necessarily approaching it satirically, I feel like you kind of, you get away with it. You earn it a little bit by making it very clear that this is an intentional choice. It's not there just for the sake of gratuity. The gratuity actually has a purpose to it.
Right. And I think it's also that every time that it happens, it serves like a narrative function. Like even one of the secondary protagonists of the show, like their whole purpose is about freeing the human body from clothing. So like it like you could say, "Oh man, that's so but it's like that is the explicit plot purpose of this thing." So I also like that aspect of it. I feel like we're teetering on the edge of spoilers, so I think I am going to transition us to the spoiler section. So I'm going to give you a chance, if you haven't had a chance to check out Kill la Kill. It is on Netflix, it's on Hulu. It is also available on Crunchyroll if you want to check it out there. If you're looking to watch it ad-free, Netflix has both the sub and the dub, so you can also check it out. The sub is very well done. I believe it was done by Bang Zoom Entertainment, so big ups to them because it was a very well done dub. It really captured the feeling of the original voice actors, and I appreciated that. While you're here, if you would like and you're feeling so inclined, you can go on to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating or review. That way we get bolstered and you know, rise through the ranks of our own Honnouji Academy, which is iTunes charts. So other people can find us and other people can get their own Goku uniforms by leaving us a 5-star Goku uniform review. I'm really integrating this. I'm doing a great job. Thank you. And so I believe that that is the extent that we have for giving you time. So we will be back right after this break. All right, we are back. And now that we're past the spoiler wall, I feel like it is my chance to say, oh shit, y'all didn't think we were going to do some gay shit during Pride Month, did you? Oh yeah, we decided to slip this in right before the end of it, baby. You was like, yo, these niggas going to do some gay shit. And I was like, fuck yeah, we're going to do some gay shit.
That's what I said.
Uh-huh. So I'm excited that we got to do Kill la Kill because it's one of my favorite shows that also has some nice LBGTQA plus representation. That said, Lex, I think it's time for you to bust a recap.
All right. So bear with me and keep in mind what I said before about how this mostly looks like abstract like spin paint art in my brain. And feel free to jump in and save me at any point because a lot happened in this narrative that I cannot profess to understand. But here we go. Ready? So the story is set at the Honnouji Academy, which is seems to be run essentially by Lady Satsuki, who is often not very nice and seems to have some pretty bad mommy issues. And so Ryuko comes to town, Ryuko Matoi. She's a transfer student, and she's got one of those like big sort of weird anime weapons that you see all the time. Hers is like half a giant scissor blade. It reminded me of the key thing that the dude from Kingdom Hearts has, because this is one of my anime touchstones, is that like half the time these characters have weird like oversized items that are big sort of broad weapons they can use. So she's got one of those, and she is looking for the person who killed her father. She finds this sentient outfit that talks to her, and it basically attaches itself to her body and transforms her so that she can be like this super powerful fighter, and she's able to go and sort of take on the person that she fought initially and got beaten up by. She makes a friend, Mako, who is very hyperactive, needs to sit down and take some deep breaths and stuff. The whole, if I understood this correctly, the school is essentially structured around this series of battle events. And so what you want to do is sort of level up through these battle events, right? So that you can essentially get better, more powerful uniforms. Like they call them the Goku uniforms, and there's a ranking system. And it seems like it's both a power ranking system and also sort of like a social caste system. Like everybody wants to get the higher star uniforms, because with that, yes, comes more power, but of course more prestige as well. And so Ryuko, as she attempts to figure out who it is that killed her father, sort of battling her way through the ranks, she has to fight Lady Satsuki's Elite Four, which was one of the anime-ish references that maybe wasn't an intentional reference, but it reminded me of Pokemon, which also has an Elite Four. And for just a minute there, I felt safe. So she fights her way through the Elite Four, and then also confronts, what's the girl's name? Nui? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Nui?
Nui, there we go. That's how you say it. She's confronted by Nui, who has the other scissor blade, the other half of this weapon that Ryuko carries around. And Ryuko discovers that it was apparently Nui who killed her father. I know that Ryuko basically hulks out at a certain point and then gets unhulked. And then there's this whole expanded mythology about how the clothing, these like sentient outfits, are actually more like aliens. Like they're sort of like aliens, basically,
and they are aliens.
Okay, so they are aliens.
Yes.
And they basically live by. Okay, so they function via this sort of like organic technology type thing called life fibers, and they basically eat, like the clothing eats Ryuko's blood while it's on her, is what I took away from this. So it's like a sort of like a symbiotic relationship of sorts. But okay, so basically the alien clothing, I wants to like This show is fucking weird. The alien clothing, I think, wants to sort of not necessarily colonize our planet, but essentially they want to be the masters of sort of all that they survey. And part of how they're going to do that is essentially jump onto people and just eat them. Like basically just consume all their blood, and then I don't know, at a certain point probably eat through their skin and stuff, so that the clothing will be sort of the dominant species or the dominant form of life.
Okay, close. So they eat us. We are cattle to clothing. Clothing is an alien species that travels around space, evolving species in order to cultivate them to become consumed by the clothing, and then once it consumes that planet, it's like a virus in that it breaks up into smaller pieces of clothing that travel space again to find a new planet in order to subjugate.
So in the midst of all this, there's an attack by some evil clothing. Satsuki's mother, Regio, reveals that Ryuko is her daughter and Satsuki's long lost sister, and that Regio was at one point married to Ryuko's father, who she has been trying to avenge this entire time. At a certain point, right, the evil clothing basically wins for a stretch there, and then our sort of cadre of heroes like Ryuko has to sort of join forces with like I know the Elite Fours, they're the nudist beach. There's this like paramilitary cell called Nudist Beach. Get it?
Uh-huh.
Because they're anti-clothing. Basically, everybody has to sort of like they team up, and there's like some space shit, and they yeah, that's what I said. There's
Yeah.
some space shit, and then they have to sort of trounce the evil clothing invasion scheme. And then once the evil clothing is trounced, and Ryuko has found some measure of peace when it comes to the ultimate fate of her father, the clothing that has been helping her, which Senketsu is what they call this sentient bit of clothing that allied with her early on, I believe sacrifices himself to get Ryuko back to the planet, and then everybody goes home and takes a long weekend to think about how fucking weird all of their shit has become.
Yes. And then she goes on a date with Mako, and they're in a relationship now.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, bro. Don't forget about that gay shit. Because it's so good.
This is quite a program. I'm actually very proud of myself that I was able to even organize it mentally to that degree.
You did a great job.
Oh, thanks. I love validation. It's delightful. Yeah, this was quite a show.
Yes, I agree. Was there anything about it that stuck out to you, that appealed to your sensibilities out of everything that you saw?
I mean, so as you reestablished, I think before we jumped into spoilers, and as I've established on this show a number of times, for me, what really gets me to laugh, because right, like if we operate on the premise that humor is subversion of expectation, right? That's where it comes from. Well, I am pretty jaded as an audience member, and so it takes a lot to completely subvert my expectations. To get me to laugh, you really have to totally catch me off guard. Much in the same way, this show, I'm going to say roughly every 5 to 7 seconds minimum, or max, sorry, every 5 to 7 seconds max, this show did something, or somebody said something, or they pivoted in such a way that made me go, what the fuck? And so it was the sensibility of the thing, the tone of the thing, how just belligerently committed it is to riding this tone. And it's like, look, this is either really for you, or they don't care to try and appeal to you. And I sort of admire that. Like, it's either you're on board with what they're doing, or it's all just going to fly right past you, and you're going to feel completely lost and possibly a little bit scared. So I admire that about it. I admire how sort of brazenly it commits to being really fucking preposterous. And yeah, like thinking about it as satire, and as I've said, I'm not really well versed enough in the medium to be able to pick out, oh, they're making a statement about X or Y. But I can definitely see how some of the elements, like we alluded to, like the outfit, like when she puts on Senketsu, the characters are constantly commenting on how, you know, she's dressed very, I guess in their perception, dressed very slutty. Like, I don't necessarily need to know that it's also a statement about the way certain female characters are depicted in anime to be able to appreciate that it's also a statement on how society will objectify women, but then also shame the women that they are objectifying. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there are layers to this thing, I guess is my point. Like it's really, really fucking weird. But it's also, it actually has stuff on its mind. And I was very impressed, especially given how fucking weird they are so committed to being. I was very impressed that they were, in my opinion, actually able to walk that line in a pretty balanced way and actually have things of substance to say, because I think it would be very easy to look at the surface of this show without really choosing to engage and not really get any of that. Like I think it'd be very easy to look at the surface and go, this is bizarre as shit, and there's not really a whole lot here. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of stuff, but there's not really that much of substance. But I think if you dig just a little bit, again, even if you're not super well versed in the medium, I think there's a lot of actually somewhat thoughtful shit going on.
Yeah.
And so the biggest thing for me is that they actually managed to do both and to sacrifice neither. I feel like, especially when you're trying to do something this weird, I feel like you need to not need to. I feel like a lot of people might be inclined to deprioritize the weirdness if they have something that they want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And oh boy, do they not ever turn down the weirdness in this show for even a second. And I found that pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think that like the weirdness allows you to start to kind of it compels you to dig deeper into what's happening, because I think that for everything that goes on in the plot of this show, despite it being like a very big collection of like, I think if you're barely paying attention, it could sometimes feel like word soup. But like I think that it really digs into this concept of like, if you really want to understand everything that's happening, there are so many layers that you have to unfold, and it really draws you in and makes you want to unpack those layers. Like you could just take it as a regular battle anime, but it also really, really, like there are so many minuscule things that will send you down a rabbit hole in terms of trying to understand what it's trying to convey. For example, the idea of the school uniforms, and they address this directly in the show itself, and you could just kind of wash over that. You could be looking at your phone and not really be paying attention to this moment, but it really, like, from the early episodes, talks about how in the history of Japan, like a lot of school uniforms reflected that of naval uniforms or like army uniforms. And that's because after a certain point in, well, after a couple different coups from people not wanting to be in, not wanting to embrace democracy, and them kind of jumping into a more fascist regime, once they became part of the Axis, they started essentially indoctrinating children at a young age into programs that would kind of fast track them into the military. And this show itself is kind of the epitome of that, in that we have these uniforms that are effectively giving people the ability to join this paramilitary, or I guess it's basically a real military, because at a certain point they go on to attack other schools in the way that, Japan in different eras of its past had also tried to expand its territory.
Right.
We have a lot of these parallels between Japanese history that are, I think, if you try to tell it in a straight manner, it might feel like it was kind of navel gazy. But the fact that you're using this crazy allegory of this high school really helps to kind of get people engaged in this history and its connection to Japan's, darker history.
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff is clearly, I mean, it's clearly baked into it. Like I like that you referred to it as words, what is it, word soup a few minutes ago. Like
Uh-huh.
I was watching the screen, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't going to my phone because I knew that if I did, yeah, I would be completely lost. But I still feel like I was having a little bit of the word, like I didn't know anybody's name I think, except Ryuko until probably about 2/3 of the way through this. But it's all, yeah, it's all there, but you can choose to sort of engage with it or not, right? Because there's also, in addition to the sort of elements of substance, in addition to the sort of points that they're actually saying something substantive about, whether directly or indirectly, I'm so taken with how fucking strange all of this is. And I don't like I can't get past it. How does this happen? How does something come out of people's brains in this shape and in this form?
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you say that. Like, I feel like this was the feeling I get from this show is that it is almost a pure expression of a bunch of creative people trying to pull their ideas together and have as much fun as possible. Like, you can see in each and every scene the creators kind of sitting together and being like, ooh, shit, what if we did this? Or, oh, yeah, this would be a really fun way to introduce this character. And like, even from the inception, it was a really, how do I describe it? A simple concept that Imaishi kind of pulled somewhat punny words together to form the plot of the show. Like, there's a quote where he says that the plot is based on the observation that the Japanese manner of pronouncing fascio, which is the original like version of what became fascism, it's nearly the same word as fashion. And then the word for school uniform, which is seifuku, is the same word for conquest. They're basically the same when you like romanize them or whatever. And then even the title of the show, Kill la Kill, kiru can also be to wear or to cut, which is essentially the dynamic between the two main. I would say they're both protagonists, which is like Satsuki and Ryuko. So like those two, I guess, dichotomies. I use that word, right? Hell yeah. Those kind of form the show, and I think that that is something that Imaishi is really good at in terms of finding really cool ways to express contradictory concepts. And also, like, I think he found a fun way to take what could be a plain Jane coming of age story and make it as extreme as possible. Like the way that this show does its animation and the way that it expresses its ideas are to convey a feeling. And I think that that is a lot of what this show is trying to do, in that like if you take away the macro layers, which are like fascism and how clothes over time become a way of keeping the masses in kind of a sedated state, from a smaller standpoint, it is effectively that these cliques and the hierarchy that you have in high school is manifest in this school, Honnouji Academy, in that the people who are the most popular effectively like run the school, and your place in school also kind of dictates how people see you outside of school as well, which is kind of how they manifest that, in that your placement in the school also dictates your way of life outside of the school, literally. So I think that like the way that they take these concepts and literalize them, and do it in such a like straight faced manner, I think is why it's so appealing. Because like if they had shied for even a second, if they like pulled back and tried to take themselves too seriously for even a moment, I think it would break the immersion of the show. But like I think that because everyone is so dedicated to making this such a fun experience, but also really trying to take every idea that they have to its most extreme, I think you can't help but to be pulled in by it, or alienated by it, I guess.
I am, and I'm genuinely surprised, being so not an anime guy. I am very surprised that I actually fell into the former category instead of feeling alienated by it. But at the same time, yeah, like you just dropped a whole bunch of insight on me that I just did not have. Like it occurred to me as you were explaining the meaning of the title that I hadn't even I hadn't considered it at all. I was like, Kill la Kill, what's that mean? I don't know. The show's pretty violent. Probably just that. Moving on. And so that's sort of what I was talking about before, where like this show offers you the opportunity to engage purely on the surface if that's your jam. But like you were saying, like there's a whole lot going on under the hood of this thing. And I think where our opinions are converging is that yeah, it's like we seem in agreement that it's very impressive the way the show is able to handle substance. It's able to handle metaphor, allegory, sort of big, weighty themes that aren't just themes that pertain to our present and the way we do things now, but also that pertain to the history of this entire culture and how our norms became our norms and what that means without sacrificing any of the like this is consistently batshit crazy. But the other thing too is that this series, this universe, is populated with such rich but real weird characters. Like
Uh-huh.
every character in this thing is distinct. Everybody pops. Everybody has, if not necessarily clearly drawn, defined, fleshed out psychology, then certainly a clear point of view. But also, who is the guy? What's the name of the character who shows up sort of midway through? He's got the glasses. He's doing a voice. I think he's got braces on and stuff. I forget this character's name. More of that guy. Where's that guy's spinoff? I want it.
Oh, you're talking about Kaneo Takarada?
Possibly. I might be.
He's the one who uses money for ammo.
Yeah, that guy. More of that guy.
I hated that guy.
I know he's the worst. That's why I want more of him.
I mean, that's not surprising. I think that like here's my issue. I think he was more tolerable in the sub because he wasn't trying to be like a stereotype. He may be like a Japanese stereotype, but he was just like a guy who loved money. Whereas like I feel like in the dub, they were like, yeah, we're gonna use urban slang because he has gold teeth, so like, oh boy, he's got to be using stuff like yo and dad ass and stuff like that. So oh boy, we're gonna fucking have so much fun with this character. And I was not for it. I hated it at like every moment of it.
To be fair, there are very few aspects to this character that are not offensive to one degree or another.
Yeah, I know. I just feel like they didn't have to. They just didn't have to.
Well, I feel like that's maybe arguably, I mean, I guess your mileage may vary, but I feel like that's maybe the closest they come to like breaking their mold a little bit, because like every other piece of borderline problematic weirdness in this thing feels a little bit more grounded in that world, and it feels a little bit more contextualized than a lot of the choices they made with this character. And yeah, I feel
Right.
like this guy in particular really is maybe as close as they come to breaking the thing. And I feel like, and maybe it's only because I got such a kick out of how deeply problematic this character is. It
Uh-huh.
didn't break it for me, but I can see how it might be the spot where a lot of people pause.
Yeah, I switched to the sub for his episodes. Cause like he gets basically he's in 2 episodes and he's like a boss character for the raid arc, you could call it. And he is I think as a black man, I feel like I'm being made fun of in that moment, and it makes me mad. And I get that he's supposed to be like this poser, and he's supposed to be lame. Like everyone makes fun of him and how like really just shitty that character is. But I found it so grating to listen to. Like not only because of his like crazy high pitched voice, but just in the way that he unnecessarily spoke jive. Like he's like, yeah, I'm gonna fucking eat your money, bitch. Ooh, damn, I love that pussy. And it's like, why? Like we don't need this character to be this way. Like he can be obnoxious and posery without, speaking jive, I think. That was my only problem with the dub. Everything else, I feel like they really nailed the characters. But like except for that part. And I didn't know if I wanted to talk about it or not, but you brought them up, and so I gotta air my grievances.
And so we talk about how, like, if humor is subversion of expectations, like I'm sitting there watching this character and sort of taking in the way they chose to depict him, and I definitely wasn't expecting that. And so I definitely got a kick out of it. But as I think you have now pretty efficiently laid out and contextualized, maybe not for the right reasons. But I was definitely laughing. I was having a great time watching this character, but I was having it for, yes, I think reasons entirely separate from anything that may have been part of their intention. Although, it's entirely possible that there really is a salient satirical point that they're making that just went over my head.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I like started Googling if other people felt unhappy with that character. It doesn't matter. But you were talking about characters having their own specific feel and everyone feeling fully fleshed out. And so that brings me to my favorite character, or I guess one of my favorite characters, because I love every character in this show. Like if I were to rank them, I couldn't. I could give you a top five, which like Iragamaguri is in my top five. Let's see, Ragyu is in my top five. The two main heroines, Matoi and Satsuki, top five. I could go on, but Nui specifically, I really like one that she is insanely neutral evil. Like she has her own things going on, and like she's part of the grand scheme, but she mostly just wants to taunt Ryuko. And I
Right.
love that aspect. And I think because there's a moment later in the show when they are fighting, and it's after Ryuko realizes that she is part life fiber, that Nui tries to appeal to her and is like, "You're just like me." And you really get a sense that this character has this alone feeling. Like she's never really interacting with anyone cordially. Like she talks to Rangyu and it's more like a subordinate kind of relationship.
Mhm.
And she talks to Satsuki and it is very antagonistic because you can imagine that they are both kind of fighting for the same place, which is right by Rangyu's side. But like there's this moment where you really get a feel that she is kind of like the Joker and Batman, where she is just trying to be like, "You're like me. Just acknowledge that you're like me. Come on, baby. I killed your dad, but it was good for you." And I also, so that's like one aspect that I really like about Nui. But the other aspect is that the way she is animated is she's very much like I've seen it described as like a Looney Tunes character. And
Okay.
I get that in that like anytime she is dodging, they don't animate her dodging in any meaningful way. Like sometimes it'll just be her head like bobbing in the same like five places, or it'll be like there's a moment when they basically take her character model and just like spin it in 3 dimensions. So like she's a 2 dimensional item spinning in a 3 dimensional space, which I think it's weird and insane and like a very specific choice because that character also really likes to play with the fourth wall. Like in times when there are split screens, she will reach across it. In times where her name title comes up, she will like lean on it and things of that sort. So that character is the closest to like a Deadpool-esque character that we're gonna get, and I really enjoy her.
I agree with everything you just said, and I'll add to it that I'm a fan of the character design and how impractical things like her hairstyle are for things like heavy combat. And I like it. I like that she commits to and rocks that wildly impractical hairstyle. And you don't really get, like, I would assume if it was me, I would assume that if my hair did that, like the big sort of curl things that come up off her head, that at some point
Uh-huh.
while I was fighting, somebody was going to grab me by my giant curl hair things and like throw me into the sun or something like that. And I don't recall her being chucked into the sun in this show.
No.
So good for her.
Well, I mean, she's proven that she's more powerful than basically anyone else in the show. So like, even if someone were to try to grab her hair, she'd be fine. Because like the guy who does near light speed sword thrusts could barely hit her. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Right. So like that's why like I couldn't rock that hair because I would get thrown into the sun. But she manages to kind of sport this wildly impractical aesthetic and remain untouched. It's very impressive.
Have you tried wearing special clothing?
I have, although I suppose one's mileage may vary as far as what is special.
Okay. So I kept talking about Ragyo, and I really want to talk about her right now.
Okay.
So my main thing that I really like about Ragyo is her theme. This show has the best soundtrack I've heard in decades. This show's soundtrack is amazing, slaps every time. Oh yeah, baby. It slaps.
There's that one song that they use somewhat frequently when Ryuko sort of like puts the power outfit on, and you get the like transformation sequence. And I
Yeah.
don't know what the song is, and I couldn't sing it to you, but it lives in my brain now. It probably lives there forever.
Is it the Don't Lose Your Way? That one?
That one, yeah.
Yeah, that one's dope. It also has like a little rap in it if you get the soundtrack. I'll share the soundtrack with you because it's great, especially track
Cool.
17, but all of it is amazing. I think because when I was originally watching it, the soundtrack wasn't available because it was actively airing, and so the full soundtrack wasn't ready until years later. But now, I having listened to the soundtrack in my free time, I was able to really enjoy how they used it throughout the show and all the like little reoccurring character motifs, all the different like character beats that they use to emphasize with the music. So like my Satsuki's theme is really well used. It's so powerful. It is a great way of like signifying where that character is from any given moment. I mean, you just talked about Ryuko's theme, which is really fun, especially when you hear the rap. People don't like the rap, but I love it.
Wait, why don't people like the rap?
I don't know. I don't know why people don't like the rap. I think because people are garbage and their opinions are stupid. I assume that that's the only reason.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I also like, so there is a song that you get in both the instrumental form, and then you also get in like its full form. So man, I can't pronounce this. Ad lib is the like really sad version of it, where you get anytime that Ryuko was very upset and down on herself, they would play the really sad version, and then the version with the vocals is called I Want to Know. And I feel like when you listen to those two songs together, you really get a sense of, I feel like that was written specifically for Ryuko and Sinketsu, because it almost makes it seem like Sinketsu is the spirit of her father. Ooh. Which, like, I guess if the series had, or if the OTS had kind of released early, that'd be kind of a spoiler, because you really get the sense that, like, Matoi kind of becomes that piece of clothing. But that's
Right.
just my opinion. That's just me, you know?
But didn't they say at one point they say something about how they made the magic fighty talkie outfit out of Ryuko's DNA, right? That's why she like matched with it, and that's why she can talk to it and stuff like that, and nobody else can.
Yeah,
But if it's sort of like her father would share, it wouldn't be a DNA match, but they would share some because she's a direct biological descendant. So I guess technically you could have it both ways.
that's true. I mean, yeah, they basically programmed it to her neurosystem. That's why she could hear it talk. Is that like there's a moment midway through the series where they're experimenting on a baby, and then they're like, "Oh, that baby died," and they flush it down the toilet. But and so like Ryuko was that baby, and so like they had programmed it to sync with her nervous system, which I guess also if you were trying to make a thing that was going to help your daughter rise the ranks and defeat this fascist regime, you would want to put a little bit of yourself and like an AI in there to be like, here's what you gotta do.
Right.
Yep. So but
Just
also
like that.
just like that. But also, I think Gamagori's theme on the track, it's called Gorilla Jaw L. It's weird.
Okay.
That theme is probably the one that sticks out to me the most because it's so distinct and it's one of the first themes you hear. Like when they are establishing the vibe of the show, you get this really, I would say, fantastic opening scene where they're talking about the theme of the show, which is fascism, because the teacher is essentially recounting how Hitler came into power. And then you essentially
Right.
go right into the introduction of this school's fascist regime, which is heralded by Gamaguri coming into this classroom with his jack boots and his uniform and beating this kid senseless and showing how over the top, but also how they manipulate the animation and his size and the way that like they are very specifically saying we are not trying to capture reality, we're trying to capture a feel. And I think they do all of this in the very first scene, like before the opening credits even start, you get all of this primer and then you really get into the action.
Right.
So I feel like we're getting close to the end. Do you have any like other thoughts about the show?
Something that the longer I sit here and I think about it, that I really would like to see, and it would make everybody but me so angry. I really would like to see somebody try and take a run at a live action adaptation of this, just to see what it would look like. Obviously, like all of the diehard fans would hate it because it would be maybe faithful in certain ways and not faithful enough in others. It would probably be received much like the Netflix Death Note movie, which is to say, I don't know. I thought it was fine, but everybody else was mad. I want to know. I want to see how it would translate. You know, like this seems like such an animation dependent show. You know what I mean? Like they're
Right.
constantly doing things that I wonder how you could translate faithfully to live action. I mean, you could do a lot with computers now, but how, you know, like how would you translate it while also making it feel sort of whole and organic and correct and like the thing you're basing it on? I want somebody to try it. I don't even necessarily need it to be any good at all, but I really want somebody to take a swing at it because I feel like this in live action
Why?
would do, because I think it would be hilarious.
I like it. Here's what you're saying. You're like,
Yes.
look, I know that this is in the ultimate form and medium that it should be in. Like it's expressed in the medium that it is at its highest capacity. But I
Yes.
really want to see a bastardized version of this. Like I really
Yes.
want to see someone ruin the thing for a lot of money. Come
Yes.
on.
That's
Why isn't anyone
exactly what I'm
ruining this
saying.
thing?
Look, if I don't know how big the fan base for this is. I assume it's fairly sizable, but you know, if somebody sees potential money on the table, they're going to go for it eventually. So I just assume we live in a world where if something is a piece of IP that anyone has heard of, eventually somebody is going to come along and say, okay, well, let's take the name and slap it on something else and try and make a few bucks. So in a world where I sort of view it as inevitable anyway, I am curious to see, yes, as you put it, what the utterly bastardized bad version of this looks like. I am very curious.
I am not. So anyone, if you were thinking about making that, you were like, you know what? Lex is right. I'm going to tell you that Lex is wrong. Wait, save your money and do something else.
Oh
Do
my god, you know what we
anything
do?
else.
we do the totally bastardized remake version, but the lead is not Ryuko. The lead is now the super problematic character.
Oh man.
It'd be so good. It would be
Uh-huh.
so good. And we do it. Here's what we do: we put all the money we can into it, but we do it producers. So we produce the show, but we turn it into a surefire flop, so that we don't have to pay back any of the backers, and we get super rich.
This sounds like that's an idea. Ah, man, unrelated. One thing I forgot to mention is that I also really like, in terms of the storytelling, that you had mentioned the Elite Four earlier. I like that Satsuki and her group basically are a traditional 5-man band. You're able by the end to have both the loner who has gained a found family, but you also have the group that is so dedicated to their leader and like they're tight knit, which are two separate, what do you call it, like tropes or archetypes for anime and storytelling in general. And you kind of get to have your cake and eat it too, because those two groups get to come together by the end. So I like that.
Yeah.
Please don't do an action version. Thank you guys for joining us here on Missing Out. Lex, if you'd like to create a fan fiction version or write out a spec script for what you think a live action version would look like, you are open to do so. If someone wanted to read that, where could they find you?
Yes, if somebody wants to brainstorm pitches for this bastardized live action version, I am on Twitter and Instagram sometimes at the Lex Michael. I'm around. I look at it. I don't always post, but I'm there. You can feel my presence and stuff. I also I do another podcast. Did you know? You probably knew, but if you didn't know, I do another podcast with my lovely partner Marianne Ramish, who is a YouTuber. We call it Friends with Benefits. She is a big fan of Friends, the television juggernaut that's one of the most pervasive and undying forces in popular culture. I myself am not a fan of that particular television program, but what I have agreed to do, despite my better judgment, is sit down and go through the entire series, all 5,842 seasons, episode by episode, and we're going to talk about them from a fan perspective and from a critical perspective as well. I know HBO Max just launched, so people are jumping back into that pond again. If you want to watch along with us, please, we encourage you to do so. But we have a lot of fun doing that. You can find that wherever you find your podcasts. Tauri Jay, where can people find you if you are
Oh
what the
my
people
gosh.
want? And as we know, you are what the people want.
Yeah. Well, if you're looking to find me, I'll be on Twitter writing my adaptation of Twin Peaks. It's going to
I would
be
absolutely watch that.
it's going to be made with puppets, and sometimes it's going to be claymation, and it's going to take place on a boat. And you can find me at Tauri Jay. TaurijAY. But most importantly, you can find this podcast at Missing Outcast. That's MissingOutcast. You can find us talking about what's coming up. You can find us talking about looking for suggestions for our monthly themes, things of that sort. So make sure to follow us on Twitter. I believe that next week is going to be our last week of School's Out Forever. So after that, our next theme is going to be July's, which is fictitious or hyperbolic or alternate tellings of actual events, things like 300 or Panther or Serial, things of that sort. Stuff that is based on things that actually happened, but it is a media rendition of that film. So we can't wait to jump into that. Keep a look on our Twitter for what will be included in that month. If you want to give us suggestions, we've received a few so far, and we'd like to keep that going because we want to cover things that you like. So yeah, that is about it. Until next week, this has been the retrospective that was introspective.
And now you have a new perspective. I really want to see your puppet claymation Twin Peaks on a boat. Put the offensive character in it, and then we've hit all our demographics.
I would, but I hate him.